And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
Jameson Williams has been so impressive these last couple of weeks.
Hello, and welcome to another week here on the Cover One NFL Draft Weekly Show. Once again, I am Rich Haynes at Burn River Sports on Twitter, and I am joined by Cover One's resident NFL draft expert, Russell Brown at Russ NFL Draft on Twitter. And it's an exciting week. NFL Combine is in full swing as we're getting into the first day of drills. Before we get into all of that, Russell, this week actually, even though I was in Mexico, I saw you had quite the activity on different forms of media, radio shows, things like that. How's your week been?
It's been great, man. Before I get into myself, how was Cancun? How was that whole bachelor party? How many drinks? What was the over under at as far as somebody passing out drunk?
We had quite the trip. We had 10 guys that rolled down
to
Cancun, and a couple of them were former college football players and stuff. One played at Iowa State about 6 years ago. So it was an amazing time. And actually tonight I'm drinking. My voice is a little bit it's not quite as crisp as usual, but tonight I'm drinking out of the mug. So this is the Bachelor right here, hungover, and then we all had little mugs and we were drinking on. So tonight the bourbon is being consumed out of the Bachelor party mug. But nice. It was a great time. Everyone made it back, safe in one piece. Everyone passed the COVID test and all that stuff. So we made it back.
Cool, man. That's awesome. Well, I'll cheers to your buddy, and I got a solo cup. I promise there's actual stuff in it. It's been a busy week, man. The Combine is here. I wish I was down in Indianapolis, the 4.5-hour drive south of me. I wish I was there, but just one of those things, some other obligations that I couldn't get down there. But it's been busy, a lot of different shows, a lot of different things going on. But that's how it is around this time of year. So it's fun. I'm excited to talk about, the players that have been running today, some of the rumors that came out earlier in the week, and obviously some of our predictions for tomorrow and throughout the weekend and stuff. So I'm excited for the chat as well. So any comments or questions from our Cover One listeners, if they got them, go ahead and let them fly. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of activity tonight about David Bell and Treylon Burks.
Yeah, I was able to catch. I got in late last night, so I'm a little bit behind on some of the interview stuff from earlier in the week. I'll get caught up on that. So I'm curious to see your reactions on kind of what happened earlier this week. But I was able to catch quite a bit of the Combine myself today. From a Browns perspective, I was especially interested in tight ends, and I'll get to why here in a little bit. So I was watching a lot from a tight end perspective. But yeah, so maybe let's just get right at it. Again, earlier this week, a lot of interviews. People always like to maybe glean too much, in my opinion, from interviews, but it's still interesting to see the guys talk and see how they interact with the media and see what kind of crowds gather for which players and things of that nature. So, leading up to today, what are some of your impressions or some of your takeaways from earlier this week from an interview standpoint?
Well, certainly, you look at the Denver Broncos to start. That was a team that obviously, as you look at mock drafts, they kind of get the consensus, maybe taking a quarterback of Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, things like that. And George Patton, their GM, was somebody that definitely made it a point that, they're going to be aggressive. They're going to be looking for the quarterback. They've got to get better in that area. And that doesn't show confidence in Drew Lock to me. That's them simply saying, whether it's a trade for Aaron Rodgers, whether it's Russell Wilson, Jimmy Garoppolo, or obviously in this draft by being in that position to get Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis, I think that's kind of the key. So with them, I circled to either quarterback, and I don't know what veteran quarterback they could potentially grab outside of Jimmy Garoppolo, where you're like, I feel comfortable that this guy can, play 15 to 17 games for me. If I have Jameis, I'm worried about the turnovers. If I have Jameis, I'm worried about the injuries coming back from a torn ACL. Is there anybody that's going to roll the dice on Marcus Mariota? Is that's my question as far as a veteran QB. Is anybody going to roll the dice there? I'm curious, obviously, what you think of the Broncos. Obviously, it's an AFC team with obviously our Bills listeners and obviously you being a Browns fan. it feels like that team has so much to kind of offer from a skill level, from the receivers, from the defensive players. And just the thing that's holding them back is got to be the quarterback spot.
Yeah, no, I agree. Obviously, again, I feel like Drew Lock's the guy that has some ability and he shows some flashes at times, but I think he's not that franchise quarterback. So I do think they're going to be looking in that direction, and they certainly don't want to waste the talent of Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. At the receiver positions, they have those guys early on in the rookie deal. So you want to make sure that you can put good quarterback play around them. So I agree with your point there. I think they probably will be looking for a quarterback. And you mentioned Marcus Mariota. I think he's going to get a shot somewhere, but I don't know. It's not going to be hey, here's the starter position, right? The Browns actually are a team that may kick the tires on Mariota and bring him in for competition with Baker Mayfield. So I think there's going to be an opportunity like that out there for him. So possibly the Broncos could bring in Mariota and even still draft a quarterback and have, both of those guys in the mix if they truly move on completely from Drew Lock. But yeah, the Broncos are a team that if they add the right pieces here in the offseason, they could be, a sneaky kind of contender in the AFC.
What about Mitchell Trubisky for the Browns? I mean, you talk about somebody that got a bunch of praise as far as from Brandon Beane, so quote unquote, somebody that you would want to date your daughter type deal or date your sister, whatever it was. And I find that interesting because it felt like Mitchell Trubisky had some of the tools when he was coming out. It didn't end up panning out for him, and he goes to Chicago, and there just was no. I mean, there was no support outside of Allen Robinson. Now, granted, I don't think he's a world beater by any means when you look at other quarterbacks across the league, but he's certainly somebody that I think should get another chance somewhere, at least at some point, maybe this year or next year. So we'll see obviously what happens there, but a couple of other rumors that kind of stood out from the week at the combine was, you look at the news about Jimmy Garoppolo. I mentioned him already. You look at him, where's he at as far as his injury? He's having shoulder surgery, I believe. And then he's somebody that is potentially going to be on the move here. I mean, it definitely sounds like the 49ers aren't committing to him. And when you talk about commitment, who's going to commit potentially a first or second round pick for him if they got to trade for him, if he's let go? Who's going to commit any money to him? The team I circle to, obviously, we mentioned the Broncos, but Washington makes a lot of sense. And the other veteran quarterback is Carson Wentz. You talk about not committing to a guy. Ballard and the Colts have pretty much said, it seems like they made a mistake. I mean, that's what it feels like. So I'm really surprised by that. I thought maybe Carson was going to be given another year, and maybe he still will. But with how hard it is to find QBs, you look at with the Colts, you talk about a team that's got a pretty good roster. Carson Wentz was healthy. There were some other players that weren't healthy. I'm a little surprised if they move on from him, but if he moves to another team, could it be Denver? Could it be Washington? I'm really curious about Carson Wentz. I'm curious what your thoughts on Carson is, Jimmy G, stuff like that.
Yeah, so I actually think the Colts. I would be surprised if they moved on from Carson Wentz personally. I think he showed enough last year to where, again, to your point, it's not like quarterbacks are growing on trees, right? That there's somebody that's going to just be available. And I think the Browns are in a similar situation with all those guys you just named. We have a lot of that conversation on Browns Twitter, and you get comments from Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, the GM of the Browns, and they have Baker Mayfield. He's still under contract. They're trying to figure out if they're going to extend or not. And it's like, okay, is Jimmy G, is Carson Wentz, are any of these guys actually significant upgrades over Baker? And I don't know that the answer to that question is yes. I think depending on the situation, you probably could say, Wentz has had some better productivity, maybe in a consistency fashion at times. Jimmy G has showed a little bit, he obviously had a nice run in the playoffs for a moment there, but I don't think the Browns at least are specifically going to commit to maybe one of those particular players other than maybe a Mariota come in from a competition standpoint. But I think Wentz is probably going to stay with the Colts, in my opinion. I think Jimmy G actually would be an interesting player in Denver, personally. I think that he has in my opinion, I think he has some of the better upside of that group. If he'd put in the right situation, obviously he had a good situation last year with Kyle Shanahan, but, they drafted quarterback, they drafted Trey. I think that might have, played into his mental psyche a little bit. So if he can come in and be the guy with those receivers in Denver in that defense, I think he could have some success in Denver.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. It's going to be interesting. I think that's what really holds the whole cards as far as everything that we see with free agency, this draft with quarterbacks, because when you look at this draft, you could say there could be 3 or 4 potential first round quarterbacks. I guess you could hypothetically say 5. I don't see Carson Strong or Bailey Zappi entering that group, but we could potentially see 5. And Douglas Master says here, Washington tried to trade Buffalo for Mitchell Trubisky during the season. I wouldn't be surprised to see him sign with Washington. It's very possible. I mean, it would be away from the AFC. It'd be back in the NFC. There's some pieces there. They've got some nice pieces up front as well for him, which was something that hurt him in Chicago. The offensive line was bad at times, banged up, things like that. But yeah, man, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting. These quarterbacks, obviously, they kind of hold the keys to everything. Another rumor, though, that came out, and it kind of is interesting just because Joe Shane is now in New York, away from the Buffalo Bills, and they've got Brian Dable and stuff like that. You look at them, and they're talking about nobody's untouchable. Which is alarming when you have a running back like Saquon Barkley, you have a contract like James Bradbury. There's a chance that they make some moves. I think Bradbury's probably going to go, just the way it sounds like the rumors are. But I'm curious what the Giants do. Who do they trade for? Who do they trade away, cut, release, things like that? It just seems like that roster is going to get an overhaul. And while they have the 5th and 7th pick, I mean, I got to ask the question, do they take a quarterback at 5 or 7? Because I don't think Daniel Jones is any good. I would be moving on from Daniel Jones. I've said it on every Cover One Draft podcast that I've ever done for some time now, like since last November. You got to move on from this guy, and they haven't yet. Will they this year? Because they can draft Willis or Pickett or something like that. We'll see.
Greg, our friend here at Cover One, Greg Thompson, I wish he was on hearing that comment, because for some reason he can't get off Daniel Jones from a fantasy football perspective, not so much from an NFL perspective. But he's like one of those guys, he always drafts late, hoping that, you're going to get some extra love from the legs from a fantasy standpoint. But I agree.
Say he likes those rushing touchdowns.
He does. And I always say the same thing on our fantasy shows. Like, man, I don't see it out of Daniel Jones, but you always just hoping he grabs the lightning in the bottle late with him. But yeah, Daniel Jones at 3 years now with the Giants. He's started 12, 14, and 11 games. And I mean, when you're having that much opportunity in the field, and last year only put up 2,400 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 7 picks, not that that's horrific, but that's certainly not the production you want out of your quarterback if you're going to actually compete here in the NFL.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, they went out and got a $72 million receiver that can't separate to save his life, and he caught 35 passes and no touchdowns last year. I mean, you can get that out of a 4th round receiver in this year's draft. I mean, it's asinine on how that team has been built and how bad the Giants have been, and it sucks to say it sucks to see it, because I always say this. I think football is better when the Giants are a good football team. I don't know what it is. I just find it more entertaining. Maybe I got like a little soft spot for him as a football fan. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, outside of that, from a rumor perspective, I mean, it's just rumors, right? I mean, the only other rumor that there really is, and we'll get into some of this combine stuff, is Malik Willis, potentially the first QB off the board and potentially the only QB in the top 10, has kind of been the rumor that I've gathered throughout the last 24 hours. You saw the video that probably was viral on Twitter over the last 12 hours or whatever. He was outside giving clothes and I think money and food or whatever to a homeless guy. And it's, he Wonderlic test, which, you take with a grain of salt, whatever that test even means, but he got a 32 on it, which is really good. And he had multiple offensive coordinators multiple play callers on the Liberty offense, which is impressive, because it's not every day that you have to listen to 2 people telling you the play. Sometimes, sure, you might have the offensive coordinator and the head coach or something like that, but it's rare on a weekly basis, on a game-by-game basis, where you have a quarterback having to listen to 2 people call plays and go from different downs and distances and things like that. So for Malik Willis, I think he's very well in the driver's seat to be the first quarterback off the board. And I circle, 5 or 7, possibly New York. Carolina makes a ton of sense. If I'm Carolina, I wouldn't even bother going out and getting a veteran quarterback. I've already spent enough draft assets on Sam Darnold. I'm taking either Pickett or Willis, whichever one I can get my hands on. and I'm trying to make the best of the situation if I'm them. But I'm really curious with Malik Willis. He's about to throw, I think, when they get back from commercials here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see him, to see him make the passes here at the combine. And, one of the things that I like that I think maybe he's underrated, or maybe I'm overrating it, I'm not sure, but I actually love the fact that he spent his first 2 years in college at Auburn, kind of at a big college program, big coaching staff, a little different than a Liberty situation. So I like that he's had some different experiences. And to your point, he's had to deal with, maybe a more, maybe a unique way to call plays at Liberty his last year. So I think all that helps and kind of rounds you out a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just, for me, that's something that I find intriguing and interesting. And yeah, his stock is certainly rising. And, I saw the video today, even though I just, got back into the States. But yeah, I'm really curious to see where he goes. I think, to your point, Carolina makes a lot of sense. And I like your thought process there. Like, their current situation, don't go at another veteran quarterback. You're not in a position, in my opinion, to necessarily win right away. To grab a quarterback right now and try to develop them, and go that route.
Yeah. And the other thing, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't know if you were done there. I'm sorry, but, let me just say real quick, I'm watching this come back on. I'm super excited that this is live and we're live doing this on YouTube. Yeah. I think it's freaking awesome. But also, let me just say, with the Panthers, maybe Matt Rule's just not a guy that can take a veteran quarterback and break his bad habits and develop him. Maybe he needs a young guy that hasn't been exposed to the league yet and other NFL coaches. And he needs to take that guy and develop him himself and put in his format of what the offense needs to be and the verbiage and things like that. And, Carolina is obviously when you just look at mock drafts and this draft as a whole, that's the first landing spot. It just seems likely for a QB. We'll see, obviously, but another team as well in the top 10, and I wanted to mention them as we were talking about Malik Willis, Atlanta as well, because Malik Willis is from Atlanta. I mean, when you look back at the COVID year, Atlanta took AJ Terrell out of Clemson when nobody thought he was going to go in that first round, and he went because they couldn't travel. They got to know him very well. Well, Atlanta, if they're doing the local work on a cornerback, imagine what they're doing on a quarterback of potentially the talent and upside that Malik Willis brings. So I'm so intrigued with that potential fit. Matt Ryan, probably on the last year there, they get rid of him. They can save close to, I think, $30 or $35 million next season. So it's almost like similar to what we've seen with Trey Lance, similar to what we've seen with Justin Fields. And for Malik, he goes into that situation. He sits for, maybe 8 or 9 games. Maybe it's the whole year. Doesn't matter. We've seen it become successful before. I don't believe in that mentality of, a quarterback has to play right away to be good. No, he doesn't. He can sit. You've seen it plenty times. Aaron Rodgers, so many, Patrick Mahomes, so many different quarterbacks sit for a year or 2 or longer before they're actually ready to go. So it can happen here. I'm curious with Atlanta as well, but I'm sure there's other combine questions here. I'm sure there's plenty of other things that we can get into from things outside of quarterbacks, even though they're about to steal the show here over probably the next hour or two.
Yeah, and we'll wrap up the kind of the open here about your thoughts on the early part of the week. Obviously, in your mock draft 1.0, you had Malik going to Atlanta. That will obviously, I think, would be a really fun situation for him to be in. Get to grow with Kyle Pitts a little bit. The wide receiver core obviously has been depleted over the last few years with Julio Jones leaving and Calvin Ridley's situation. But that could be a cool story for him to land in Atlanta. But yeah, before the quarterbacks do steal the show, actually, I'm curious, do we want to get into any other position groups before they start throwing? And if so, do we maybe want to touch on the tight ends? We're getting some comments about tight ends in the chat. Do we maybe want to head that way?
Yeah, we can certainly go tight ends. I saw a couple comments about receivers as well. So we can, steer us to wherever we need to go, and we'll talk it up.
Let's get our boy Pops Mafia comment up there. The tight end looked good and deep. Projection wise, watching the combine, looking at different draft boards. I don't think anyone's probably going to go ahead of the 3rd round unless we get some crazy draft stock, rising. But there did seem to be some guys that stood out to me a little bit. But I want to get your comments first. From the tight end group that you saw today, what stood out for you? What player maybe made a big impression on you?
Well, yeah, from the tight ends, I mean, Jelani Woods, it's funny. I almost tweeted this out. I didn't want to, though. I didn't want you to be pissed off at me before we got live on the air here. But Jelani Woods had 24 reps in the bench, and he ran a 4.61 in the 40. And I was like, man, I know it's not a huge need, but I could totally see like him being a 3rd round pick to the Cleveland Browns. And maybe you're okay with that. I mean, by all means, more weapons, whatever. But I was like, man, no, I'll save it for the show, whatever. But like he's had a really good week so far. It sounds like he's interviewed really well. He's tested really well. I haven't watched his film in depth yet, so I can't sit here and say what he does wrong. What is he doing right? What does he have to get better at, et cetera. But I do like what I'm seeing throughout this week, and he'll certainly be somebody between now and the draft, I'll watch. But the one tight end, obviously, that just stands out is Greg Dolce from UCLA. I mean, former colleague here at Cover One, former scout, Damian Parson. He talked really highly of him back on the YouTube shows that we did over in the summer and early fall. And he goes down to the Senior Bowl and you watch Dolce. And I mean, everything that you see on tape matches what you saw in practice and on the field. I mean, he's somebody that I think can win vertically down the field. He comes out, runs a 4.7 40. And then meanwhile, you just love to see what he does underneath. I mean, crossers, those slant patterns, maybe a couple of out routes or stuff just to the flats, and just getting the ball in his hands and letting him run after the catch is so key. So Greg Dolce, I think, made himself some money today just with his overall time, a 4.7. I think his first attempt was around like a 4.63, but he had a 34-inch vertical, 16 reps in the bench. I mean, you're talking about 6'4", 245. You can live with that. And I think when you look at teams like, potentially the Giants, who are letting go of Kyle Rudolph, probably not going to have Evan Ingram, they're in the market for a tight end. I wonder if Dolce is somebody that plays a fit there, just from when you look at what their offense could potentially be with Brian Dable and stuff like that. So I think from that tight end group today, he really stood out overall. Other than that, I mean, none of the other tight ends really caught my eye because, we didn't see Trey McBride or Isaiah Likely run. Charlie Kohler obviously didn't either. They did pretty well during the catching aspect of the drills. Trey McBride, I thought, did pretty well from that regard. And he's my top tight end. So I was kind of expecting that. But overall, yeah, Greg Dolce from the testing numbers, definitely, I thought, made himself some money over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and, your comments, I kind of mentioned at the top of the show, I wanted to kind of get into tight ends a little bit. That was the group I happened to be able to catch the most of today. And the Browns, they have multiple 3rd and 4th round picks. Kevin Stefanski, the 2 tight end offense is something that, they value that position, and they have a lot of question marks at that position with the uncertain contract status of Austin Hooper. He's underperformed from a contract perspective. There's a lot of talk that they might just move on from him and eat that a little bit and cut him this year. Also, David Nijoku, who has shown some flashes at the tight end position, athletically is a freak, can really make some plays down around the goal and in the red zone. But again, he's, are they going to keep David Nijoku? That's a big question mark. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Browns moved on from at least one of those players. Harrison Bryant is their other tight end that, gets a lot of reps for them and actually has been pretty solid. But went after maybe a Trey McBride or a Jelani Woods. Actually, it's funny that Jelani caught your eye as well. He's the first player I have on my notes here. Again, 6'7", 4.61, 24 on the bench. And I really thought from a sled perspective, did the sled well for that size. It's tough to be 6'7" and get down and get the leverage on the sled. And he was one of the smoother tight ends, I thought, today from a sled standpoint. You saw a number of them struggle with that. They stand, they got stood straight up and the sled doesn't go anywhere. And, that matters, I think, in today's NFL, unless you're truly just going to split that tight end out, as another wide receiving option. But in an offense like Kevin Stefanski's, having that versatility to be able to block and be a pass catcher is really big. So Jelani Woods stood out. Trey McBride stood out as well for me, even though he didn't run. But I agree with you. I thought he was very smooth on the gauntlet. Obviously, huge production last year with 90 catches and over 1,000 yards. And again, I thought he did pretty well on the sled portion as well from a blocking standpoint. So those guys stood out for me from a tight end perspective. And I think they could be targets, and I'm just curious, the Bills, they have Dawson Knox, and he really stepped up, last year for Buffalo. But I wouldn't be shocked if they might be in, trying to add some talent. I think Robin Gronkowski's been rumored to potentially be a target for Buffalo. I mean, I'm sure that's, it's just, rumor or whatever. But I don't think it'd be a bad decision for them to possibly add some talent, in that 4th, 5th round area to this position group as well.
Yeah, they could. I mean, I would like to think of like Daniel Bellinger from San Diego State might end up falling into that category for them. He ran a 4.63, had 22 reps in the bench, a 34.5-inch vertical. And there's times on tape where he's, a really willing blocker. And I think that's something that they really need to consider. Is that they need to get that guy that maybe plays that Lee Smith type of role. I mean, Dawson Knox is more that vertical threat. Kenny Pickett's first time up, unofficial 4.67, a 4.67. So we'll see. Dan Marino's wiping his face as he watched him run there.
Is he eating some chicken wings or something there, Dan?
Yeah. But no, I mean, like for the Bills, like Daniel Bellinger, but there were times like at the Senior Bowl, he lost some reps in one-on-one situations. Appreciate the comment there from David. Appreciate you joining in, even if you're late, doesn't matter. But other than that, I think if they find a value, I'm really curious on Charlie Kohler for them. I think Kohler is somebody that is got that size, reminds me a little bit of like a poor man's Kyle Rudolph, who plays with his frame. He understands how to box out some defenders. He has good length for the position, and he can catch away from his frame consistently. He's got a big catch radius, and he's a willing blocker. So I'm curious as far as where they would value him, somewhere on that maybe 3rd day of the draft, 4th or 5th round, and maybe they'll find some good value. They're similar to how they did with Dawson Knox. So
I think this is an interesting question from Jason, and you're kind of touching on it, as we're talking about the Bills tight ends a little bit. And, Pops Mafia also made a comment, Douglas made a comment after that as well, saying, Buffalo kind of just rolled with Dawson Knox in that second half of the season. And
4-5.
4-5. There we go, Desmond. I mean, that's catching. And he's wearing my favorite number, 13. So, I appreciate that. But, from that tight end perspective, I would say, for me personally, round 4, round 5 is probably a good round to invest an asset in a tight end too, especially if I don't think that position was very deep for Buffalo, but what's your opinion on that?
One more time with that question. I'm sorry.
The one we have up, what's a good round for a tight end 2 from a draft round perspective to add that to that position group?
Well, kind of like I just kind of said, Charlie Kohler, 4th or 5th round. I think the Bills, they can't get too cute. I felt like last year at times they got a little too cute, doubling down with 2 defensive ends, 2 offensive tackles. I like the mindset. I like going in the trenches, but you don't have to go too early here. You don't have to go in the 2nd or 3rd round. Like, sure, it would be great to have Charlie Kohler or an Isaiah Likely or something like that. But at the end of the day, like you need to get somebody that can fill in the void when Dawson Knox isn't on the field. And if you are having him on the field, who can fill the void opposite of Dawson Knox? And I think Charlie Kohler, I think that's the guy. And if you can get him in that 4th or 5th round with his size, again, with his style of play, the way that he is got that frame, I'm super intrigued with him. And I'm seeing some stuff as far as Ferguson, out of Wisconsin. And look, I don't mind Jake Ferguson. He doesn't blow the doors off of anything that he does. So like, if you bring him on, you're not going to get elite production. You're not going to get elite blocking. Like he doesn't do any one thing great. He does kind of a couple of things well, but there's inconsistencies to his game. So it's just one of those things. I wouldn't spend a ton of time worrying about which backup tight end I can get. If like, let me ask Bills Mafia this. I mean, sure, you could draft a tight end, but what if you go out and sign, obviously, Gronkowski, but if you don't get him, what if you just sign Evan Ingram to a 1-year deal? Or what if you sign Kyle Rudolph to a 1-year deal? I mean, who's to say that doesn't happen? If you can get one of those guys, or as you alluded to, Rich, Austin Hooper, if he's gone, if the price is right, you could bring him in, and it's just another body into the mix there. But ultimately, your tight end 1 is Dawson Knox. And sup to Ron. Ron Beck is in the house. Let's go.
Ron, cheers, man. There's bourbon in this tumbler. Long story. Tune in at the beginning of the show to find out why.
Right.
But yeah, no. And Pops brought up a good point. I actually, thought Jake had a rough sled drill there as well, which is interesting because I feel like he has to be good in the blocking scheme to be useful in some of those passing areas. So I thought, granted, it's just, you don't get to see much. It's right. It's a couple attempts at the sled, but that's the time where you need to perform. One last question for tight ends, and maybe we can transition to the wide receiver group a little bit as we continue to watch the quarterbacks run here at the combine. Brock Purdy's up right now. He ran a 4.81 in his first attempt.
Man, Brock Purdy.
4.76, improved upon it slightly. But Brock's not much of a running threat, so I don't think his 40 time is that big of a deal personally, in my opinion. But Connor, what up, fellas? What's up, Michelle? How you doing? Connor Hayward. To me, he's a little bit of an interesting prospect. He's played running back, kind of like an H-back almost, tight end. He's obviously short in stature for a tight end. What's your opinions or comments on Connor Hayward?
I love Connor Hayward. I mean, I'm a Michigan State guy, so obviously I have a little soft spot for him. Former running back, there was times definitely where he, made me a little upset when he would run the football. But I think he's a really good pass catcher. Get the ball in his hands, he can make some things happen. He did enter the transfer portal at one point. Glad he came back. But I like him as an H-back. I think you can utilize him as a fullback at times. I thought he ran pretty well, and there's a 4.49 for Desmond Ritter. So. Oof. The guy's moving. The guy can do zone reads. And when you talk about potentially the second or third quarterback off the board, it wouldn't surprise me if it was him. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. But, that's a cool comp. Desmond Ritter with Marcus Mariota. Yeah. Look at those intangibles. Yeah, that's pretty close. But no, yeah, I mean, I like Connor a lot. I don't think, there's a chance he's a UDFA. I'm going to be honest about it. I mean, you don't see a lot of fullbacks go. And it's just more so who's going to end up taking him and where can they find him on the field for, not 100% of the snaps, but, you're talking about a guy that's probably going to play upwards to 60 to 70% of your offensive snaps, but he's going to play a lot of special teams. So can you find value there? Is it potentially Pittsburgh with his brother Cameron? Is it potentially a team like Detroit that coached him down at the Senior Bowl and they love to run the football? They've made that an emphasis. Do you bring him in and potentially see a bunch of stuff? We'll see. But I like Connor. He just, one of those guys that not going to outrun anybody, good between the tackles, can catch the football a little bit, and just a solid H-back, All
right. Well, I think we hit a lot of the tight end position group there. A lot of good discussion. Keep the comments flowing. Let's maybe transition into the wide receivers. They did some work today as well as we continue to watch the quarterbacks run here at the 2022 NFL Combine. But from the wide receiver group, who stood out to you today?
Got to go with my boy Velus Jones. He ran a 4.34, ended up on a second run running a 4.32. I don't care what his age is. I don't care if he's 24, if he's 25. I don't care that he was catching passes from Sam Darnold for 2 years at USC. He's going to get that Van Jefferson love as somebody that's going to be 24 when he's drafted and he's too old and not going to produce because it doesn't happen. I don't care about that stuff. He checked in really well at the combine. He was 6 foot. Let me pull up his numbers here. But, just going off of what I saw from him at the Senior Bowl, that was enough for me to be like, let me go back and watch his tape. He actually ran the fastest time, a 4.31. But he checked in at 6 foot, 204, had a 33-inch vertical. I'm pretty positive when you look at the numbers, damn near close to what Van Jefferson does. You talk about the age. There's just so many things that compare the two. Jefferson went in the second round. There's no reason why Velus Jones doesn't go in that second or third round. And when you look at the Bills, potentially, as I see this question here from Jason Taylor, would the Bills dare take a wide receiver in round 1? They very well could, but if they don't, second or third round, I'm all for Velus Jones here out of Tennessee. Really shifty route runner, does a great job with his releases, and he just makes defenders miss with this consistent head fake. It looks like he's going this way, and he ends up going this way, and it's just one of those things where you love to see what he can do at all 3 levels of the field, but knowing that his speed can push vertically down the field, it's important. And I like Velus Jones a lot. I'll talk obviously about Calvin Austin, but I'll get your thoughts on Velus and anything you want to add as Chris Olave gets ready to run here.
Oh, Chris Olave from my boys, The Ohio State University. Let's
4.26. Holy moly!
Wow, is that tie? Is that tied for the fastest in combine history? I think Chris John. I'll have to bring that up. That's right. It's right there. Maybe 4.22, but it's right there. That's going to be like second or third fastest time in NFL Combine history there from Chris Olave. So that is smoking fast.
Holy can I swear on this show? Is
sure,
that
why not? Go for it.
Holy shit. Golly.
Wow.
I wasn't expecting that. I'm sorry.
No.
I was not expecting that. Like I was thinking like a 4.34, a sub 4.4 for sure. To see that, holy shit.
He was moving. And, you know, we mentioned this on the wide receiver breakdown. 4.22 is John Ross. 4.22 is the record.
That's
and then
it,
you
right.
have Chris Johnson at 4.26. But it's right there. So how do you guys slip pants on after? Well, you know what? We're drinking and we're starting to swear after that, Greg. Yeah,
I don't.
Russell already took his pants off. It's getting a little wild in the NFL Draft Weekly show. But Chris Olave, I mean, I mentioned it on the the wide receiver show when we talked about Chris Olave a little bit. You get him in space on those deep vertical crossing, and he just pulls away from the defenders, and it looks like it's just bad coverage. No, he's just that fast and pulling away from people. So yeah, that's going to really solidify him as maybe moving up a little bit, or separating himself from those 5 or 6 wide receivers that no one really knows exactly who's going to really take that number 1 spot yet, if you kind of, go across the board there. But yeah, moving there for Chris Olave. Back to your comment on Vilas. I like Vilas. I'm a little less interested in him than you personally. I don't know. I just get a little bit. I'm one of those guys that you mentioned, hey, he's been in the league for a long time. The age thing doesn't really concern me as much. I'm just, I don't know where I stand on Vilas. But Calvin Austin was somebody, and you mentioned him as well. Another great time, 4.32 on the 40. And I thought he was real smooth in the gauntlet drill. Obviously short of stature, I believe he came in at 5'9", but there's definitely ways to use those types of receivers. I mean, Tyreek Hill's only 5'10", not to say he's Tyreek Hill, but just to give a similar size comparison. What are your thoughts on Calvin Austin? Because again, I thought he looked really nice, especially in the gauntlet, using that speed that he showed in the 40, but in a drill where you're actually running and catching the football. Because if you noticed, some other wide receivers, they struggled, I felt, with that, where they're not using their speed and they're kind of slowing down and trying to concentrate on the football instead of just going.
Yeah. I mean, Calvin Austin, I was expecting him to blow up the combine. I'm going to be honest. He's, got Olympic speed when you look at what he's done on a track and field. I mean, he's been in track and field, I think, since he was, man, I'm going to have to pull up his profile for myself. But I want to say he's been doing track and field since he was 7 years old or 8 years old, 7 years old. And, yeah, he's been running track since he was 7, and he's won state championships after state championships. And he's just one of those guys that you knew it. And when I look at what he did today, 39-inch vertical, broad jump of total of 135 inches, a 4.3 240, very comparable to Taylor Gabriel at 5'8", 170 when you look at those numbers. And I think play style is one of those things as well. With Vilas and Calvin, I think you can see stuff from them playing out of the backfield because, one, you're going to get them on jet motions and jet swings and things like that. You're also going to see a lot of orbit motions with them out of the backfield, maybe even handing the ball off to them. Special teams value is obviously huge. I love Calvin Austin as well as one of those 2nd or 3rd round receivers. Maybe one of these guys is certainly in that top 50 mix. I'm really curious how Christian Watson's going to test here coming up because, I mean, he's already killing it. He had 11.4 for his broad jump. So I like Calvin a lot. I really do. I thought from a route running perspective, what he was able to do down in Mobile, nobody impressed me more in that area than him. So he had a great Senior Bowl. He's had a great draft process. And again, when you watch the tape, you can see the mismatch, the versatility, what he provides for in offense. So I'm really, really intrigued by him. Greg had a comment real quick. What are your thoughts on a developmental prospect being 24, turning 25 in May? Just a note or an actual red flag? I'm taking this. Me?
Yeah. Go ahead. I mean, Russell, you kind of spoke on that one.
Yeah.
Already a little bit, and I guess I'll recap it just for Greg real quick. Russell really didn't have a big issue. Actually did a really nice comparison to, Van Jefferson's kind of route and kind of how Van has done in the NFL to this point. So he thought there was maybe some synergies there or some comparisons to Van Jefferson. I kind of honestly am on a little bit of the other side of that. I'm a little more concerned about that fact. Again, the age part doesn't really concern me as much as just being in college for I think 6 years. Between the different colleges there. So I don't know. I'm just curious. And none of those years in any of those systems did he really blow the doors off from a production perspective. But obviously he's showing out pretty well today at the combine. And then, moving on to a couple of the other questions, I want to move down to Jason's question. We'll get back to Pops here for a second. But, are any of these speed receivers more of a one-trick pony, or do they actually have game? I mean, obviously Chris Olave has game. I mean, Chris Olave is he's an amazing, well-rounded.
He's a complete receiver.
Complete receiver. But I think that's a very fair question for somebody like Calvin Austin, who had really great production at Memphis for the last 2 years. So I'm pretty sure he's definitely a complete receiver as well. But what's your take on that question?
Yeah, no, I really do think a lot of these guys do actually have some game. I mean, when you look at Calvin Austin, I could pull up a clip right now, which I guess I could try to do as we sit here. It's not broadcast tape, so we don't got to worry about anything. But it's one of those things when you watch Calvin Austin play, he's somebody that he does pretty well in one-on-one situations. There's going to be a lot of times when he's matched up in man coverage and things like that, where he is going to have to beat a guy one-on-one. And when he does, it's going to be where he can win in one in the short areas of the field. But also, there's times where you watch him against Houston, he goes up and he catches a jump ball along the sideline. And that stuff's impressive to me for what he can do. So yeah, no, they've all kind of got a different part of the game, that you like to see. They don't, Calvin Austin doesn't do every little thing right, like that we would maybe say about a Chris Olave is not necessarily that complete receiver, but I do like Calvin Austin a lot.
Yeah, Calvin Austin's somebody that really intrigues me. Again, I thought he was very smooth, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, in that gauntlet drill, which I love the gauntlet drill. I think it's a drill that matters from a speed perspective and being able to catch the football, because I like drills like that. Also the drill where they're having the wide receiver kind of released down the sideline, the quarterback's putting it over the shoulder throw. You can see whether it's the tight ends or the receivers adjusting the ball in the air. I think those are important drills. One kind of side question for me to you, I'm curious on your opinion, and for anyone in chat, feel free to answer this as well. I wish we could do some polling on here. If we could do polling, I'll figure that out maybe for next time.
That'd be awesome.
But I would love if people if they ran in pads. I don't know why they don't run in pads from a 40-yard dash perspective. I would love to see these guys translate that speed with pads, because I do think that matters a little bit. You see some guys with game speed or game tape that's faster than 40s, or some people are faster, on the 40-yard dash than during the games. And I've always wondered why they don't just, maybe not the helmet, but put them in pads, have them run in pads. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know why they don't do that. I don't know if it's just to simply try to prevent any type of injury, or I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because when you see them running pads, you don't want to see the real thing. Maybe I don't know. Maybe because they know they won't run as fast. So this is to get as many eyes as possible on this. I honestly, I don't know. I don't know what the reasoning behind it is. Maybe it's something within a contract with the NFL, the NFLPA, or I don't know. That's a great question. That's one for Alexa on the way out the door or something.
On the way out the door today. If Greg's still listening in, yeah, pads and helmets. If Greg's still listening in, maybe he's kind of our resident cap expert and legal expert from Cover One. So maybe you can go find out if there's any legal ways as to why they don't run pads. And you're probably right. Probably started with, hey, obviously people run more comfortably in shorts, right? So now they have all these times and historical data on people not running in pads. So, that would kind of reset all of that. But, that aside, I think it would translate a lot better. And let's be honest, people are still going to watch the combine, whether they're running those 40s in shorts or in pads. But just curious, I went down a rabbit hole for a second, but I was thinking about that earlier today.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, I know a lot of people that don't like the combine. Like, they're like, I don't care about the underwear Olympics. And if you are that person, that's fine. But even if people don't like it, they still watch it every single time. So it's football. Football is king, and that's just what it is. It's always been that way. It'll always be that way.
We got another Michigan State boy. A little question from Pops Mafia, Jalen Naylor. I actually was somewhat impressed with his combine today. Again, the gauntlet drill impressed me for him as well. But curious on your take on Jalen Naylor, where you think he may go in the draft. How is he doing so far in the NFL combine?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he looked pretty fluid. I thought he did really good through that catching gauntlet drill thing that they do. I've always liked Jalen Naylor. I was a little surprised that, he didn't come back. I thought he was going to come back and potentially put himself in that conversation for next year as maybe one of the top wide receivers or a top 50, top 75 player, because I don't see him as a top 75 player. But, from a vertical threat standpoint, I do like what he can do vertically. I like how he ran. Again, I like what he did today. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if he was like a 6th or 7th round pick, maybe a 5th round pick. And to be honest, I mean, maybe a UDFA. I hate saying that about one of my guys, but it happens at times. I mean, not everybody gets drafted. Other guys do. And it's one of those things where he probably doesn't get drafted, and maybe he ends up on a team like the Kansas City Chiefs. Like when he ran his 40, I almost tweeted that, like, up future Kansas City Chief Jalen Naylor, because he ran fast and he's going to be, maybe not a gadget player for them, but somebody that they use probably in the short areas of the field and then deep down the field. So I like his skill set. Don't get me wrong, but compared to some of these other receivers, I think there's a lot more complete receivers in this draft.
And speaking of who I felt was a complete receiver, and then you touched on him in your mock draft 1.0 that we haven't really mentioned yet. In my opinion, he's struggling a little bit at the combine so far. Treylon Burks out of Arkansas, he's in that conversation, top 5 wide receivers. He has good size. I didn't think he did particularly well at the vertical jump. I believe it was only 32 or 33, which isn't horrible, but it's certainly not, jumping through the roof. I believe Jamar Chase was like a 41 last year, just from a comparison perspective, and a 4.55 in the 40s. So what's your take on Treylon today?
I still think he's a first-round receiver. I mean, I think when you watch the tape, there's so much to like with him, and you look at him on an Arkansas team, which has some talent on it. Don't get me wrong, but you're not talking about an elite quarterback by any means. And you see a receiver that does so well after the catch, and you saw what he could do behind the line of scrimmage, watching him run deep down the field. You just have to look at that and say, hey, that's enough for me. And if we look at Calvin Austin or Velus Jones or one of these other guys and say, well, their production, it just was very limited, I'm a little concerned there. Well, when you look at Treylon Burks, the production wasn't limited. So I think you take him. I think you try to find a spot for him. Maybe he's more of a quote unquote power slot type of receiver or something like that. Just that bigger slot receiver. But if he can go out and catch a 60, 70 passes, get close to 1,000 yards and maybe 10, 11 touchdowns, easily maybe 7 or 8, I think you're getting your money's worth. I mean, it's just one of those things. Now, obviously, it'll get interesting when he gets that second contract. Do you pay him, Kenny Golladay type money or not? I don't know. We'll see. But ultimately, I like Treylon Burks. I really do. And I think his – God, a
4.21.
This is not even – that wasn't even live. That was a commercial.
No,
that was
during the commercial.
And there's Jalen Tolbert, 4.5, which, by the way, the guy's got tracking ability for days. One of the best trackers in this draft. But no, yeah, I mean, I like Burks quite a bit. I still think you take him. And again, I think you can find ways to utilize him across the board in your offense. And, maybe he doesn't necessarily go top 10, but first round, I like if he was there at 32, I'd be stunned if the Lions passed on him.
Okay.
4.28 for Christian Watson. This guy's going in the first round.
Yeah, some of these guys are absolutely flying right now at the wide receiver position. I mean, these are impressive times. And Jason Taylor, I'm assuming you're talking about Jameson Williams here. His question: who's the receiver towards ACL? And it's thought to be a first rounder anyway. I'm assuming that Jameson Williams, which we've talked about a little bit. He's obviously not participating in the combine today. He's still recovering, but I believe there's some video of him on social media recently where he was actually making some nice progress. Looked like he was recovering well, doing some physical therapy from that knee. And in Russell's mock draft 1.0, he actually had him going to the Bills. There was pick 23 or 25, pick 25, I believe. There's Garrett Wilson, 4.37. That's pretty good for Garrett too. The other wide receiver out of the Ohio State University, not quite the burner Chris Olave is, but 4.37 for him. In my opinion, a better hands catcher than Chris Olave. He makes some really nice catches away from his body or even on the sidelines. I can remember a number of plays he made where he's kind of, contortioning his body and making hands catches. So I'm a Garrett Wilson fan, but yeah, Chris Olave was smoking at that 4.26.
Yeah, no, and I don't know if a lot of people are going to talk about Christian Watson here. I mean, I know Thornton ran that 4.21, which is amazing. His teammate at Baylor, I think it's Kalen Barton, he's rumored to run a 4.2. He won a 100-meter dash in high school at 10.04 seconds. So the guy runs like the wind. So him and Thornton were the ones that were rumored to potentially blow the doors off in this 40. Obviously, we'll see what happens, but I will say Christian Watson running that time at 6'4" with 11.4 broad jump. I'm just going to call out my Detroit Lions now. It's your move at 32, you cowards. You better draft him. I mean, I'm just going to call it what cowards. It is. So,
I'm going to have to personally. I've not done a lot of study on Christian Watson, but yeah, I'm going to have to do that myself because that was good.
Well, here's an interesting one from Charles G here. Khalil Shakir running a 4.3. I don't think a lot of people talk about Khalil that much, and I don't know why. I mean, I thought he had a pretty good Senior Bowl. And when you look at that day 2 receiver somewhere in that second, third round, maybe if you're looking for that next Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Everybody's looking for that guy. You're seeing him move like that, and I mean, he's a quick route runner. He's got that ability to win at all 3 levels of the field. He understands how to threaten with leverage with his feet and his hands. He's got kind of a veteran release package. When you watch him, it's very detailed and looks just very experienced with it. So I like Shakir a lot. And, to have that time so far, a little bit on the lighter side, a little bit thinner than, St. Brown, but enough to say, hey, second, third round, I'm taking this guy.
And George Pickens just put up a 4.43 and then a 4.40, and at 6'3", 200. That's some decent speed out of a guy that's 6'3". Maybe just comparing him again a little bit to Treylon Burks, and from a combine standpoint, obviously ran a little bit better than Treylon. So, obviously a guy that didn't get much playing time last year in 2021, and somebody we talked about a little bit in the wide receiver preview. But any take on George?
Yeah, I mean, look, if George can stay healthy, that's the key. If he can be somebody that can be on the field for you, you can justify taking him with a top 50 pick, a top 75 pick for sure. It's just if he's not healthy. But I like what he can do deep down the field. He's got a big catch radius for his size, and he looks damn near as sure-handed as just about any receiver out there. I mean, you see some really acrobatic catches from him, really good body control. So I like Pickens a lot. I know a lot of people that have talked about him just being a first-round receiver, maybe him at 32 to my Lions or maybe even like 28 to the Packers, which it's possible, very possible, but I like him more in that second-round range. If I'm going to be honest, I think a lot of these teams in the second round make just a lot more sense. You look at the Giants, you look at the Jets, potentially maybe New Orleans at 49. That would make a lot of sense to me. So obviously we'll see what happens, but I think that range makes a lot of sense.
And just to kind of wrap up here, we're coming up, we're passing 8:30. We probably do need to transition to the quarterbacks a little bit, even though, they haven't, maybe put on some quite, at least not in my opinion, quite the show that the receivers are currently putting on from a running perspective. That's for sure. But we probably should transition to quarterbacks a little bit. But just to wrap up, I think we had 11 or 12 guys now in the wide receiver group that is under 4.4. And cornerbacks better have their PT Flyers on, because this amount of speed that's coming in to the NFL with this group, I mean, goodness. And even some guys we even talked about that I think are potentially going to be good wide receivers, like Johan Dotson, which I know you like. 4.43 is nothing to, that's not bad. that's not a bad time.
Not even a little bit. And I'll be honest, man, Johan Dotson is just what, I mean, I talked about sure-handed receivers. He might have the best hands in the draft. I mean, consistently catching away from his frame. And when you see that stuff, I mean, you have to be super excited about where his future is as a pass catcher in this league. I think you look at Darnell Mooney, potentially as maybe a comparable when you look at what Mooney did when he was coming in to the league. I'm trying to find my tweet of him. I'm sorry. But Mooney tested very similar to him. And again, Dotson is somebody that fluid lower body, super flexible. Again, I mentioned catching away from his hands. I love his skill set. I think he's a first round caliber receiver. And if you didn't have obviously Olave, if you didn't have some of these other guys, I think we'd be talking about Johan Dotson as the top receiver for sure.
And after seeing this, just to throw in a little bit of Browns information just for a minute, like I know a lot of people want Browns to take wide receiver at 13, but with the depth of this class, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if any of those edge rushers fall to 13. That may make them question, grabbing a receiver at 13 and having, grab one of these guys in the second round. But this class right now is very impressive, which we knew was going to be impressive. But I mean, they're exceeding my expectations, at least right now from a running perspective.
What did I completely missed it? I think I was talking right after the Watson time. What did Garrett Wilson run? Did we see that? I didn't see his time.
Garrett
I think you're back.
4.37.
A 4.3. Okay. All right. Yeah. I figured he'd be around that range. I mean, he's not going to outrun any specific receiver, some of these faster receivers, obviously, but 4.37 is moving. I mean, let's not forget that 4.3, like Shakir with a 4.35, like that's moving. I mean, you're seeing these guys move, and Wilson's a lot better of a route runner than I think he gets credit for. And I know I mentioned him last week. He kind of falls in that 5th or 6th position ranking for me, but it's just one of those things with him. I mean, he's got great body control. He's potentially the first receiver off the board with that 4.37. I don't know. Chris Olave though, that's that might be putting him up there in that top 12, top 14 category.
Yeah, his stock definitely rose on that run. I mean, Garrett Wilson, we've talked about it, again on our past wide receiver show, and others have talked about it as well. Route running, but just the quickness, the quickness and that burst is what helps him get that separation. So maybe not exactly the straight line speed as Chris Olave, but Garrett Wilson, I think, certainly can separate very nicely. And again, to your point, 4.37 is moving. I mean, this class is very fast from a wide receiver perspective. So 4.37 is nothing to shake a stick at as far as being able to get downfield and hit a home run at the same time. But again, we're coming up almost at 8:40. We obviously want to get out of here before our next show, but we do want to talk about quarterbacks for a little bit. But go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, no, I was just going to say, I didn't know if we were signing off yet or not, because I know we're getting close to that hour marker and stuff like that. But I'm just going to say this. I am not getting off until Christian Watson runs a second one. I am not leaving this seat. I don't care what anybody says.
That's fine. Well, let's keep talking about quarterbacks. Hopefully he comes up and gets the second run.
In the words of Leo in the what the hell's that movie? Damn it. I ain't leaving. What's that movie?
Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah,
there we go. I
ain't leaving. There's a lot of other things you probably can't say on air when he was giving that speech.
But yeah, no, with the quarterbacks, Malik didn't run today, but Desmond Ritter, he hit that 4.49 just about 20 minutes ago, maybe 30 minutes ago. I like his skill set a lot. When you watch him play, he's somebody that runs a lot of zone read concepts with that offense.
Here's your boy.
Yeah. And he runs a lot of zone read stuff, and you just love what you see from him overall from the athletic standpoint. But from a quarterback standpoint, just seeing what he can run or seeing what he can do with the football in his hands. I mean, he can make just about every throw on the field. He's just got to get better with some ball placement. There you go. A 4.31.
Consistent.
Yeah.
Very consistent speed out of Chris Johnson.
Yeah, we'll say a 4.3 just to be safe and move from there with a 6'4" receiver that flexible lower body. He's got the ability to outrun defenders. Let's go. But yeah, no, quarterbacks today, Desmond Ritter for sure. I'm curious to see what he does with this group of receivers here when we sign off, and how his timing is. And that's a big thing. If he can get timing down, if he can get some of the ball placement down, I like Ritter a lot. And I mentioned, in my first mock draft, he goes to the Saints because I think the Saints are in the need of a quarterback to potentially play day one, because it's not going to be Taysom Hill. And if they can't get a veteran, they might have to settle for a guy that I think can play day one, and that would be Desmond Ritter.
So real quick, Jason Taylor, he can't even do the 10-yard dash in 4.37. So
Come on, Jason. Yes, you can.
Actually, before COVID, the last Browns training camp before COVID, so that was 19. They have the 40-yard dashes set up right for fans to run. And at 40, I ran in 5.4, and I was like really impressed with my 5.4 at 40 years old in the 40-yard dash. So it's fun to do these drills, though. They have all the combine drills set up at Browns training camp. At least they used to before COVID. So hopefully they do that again in the future. But any other comments on quarterbacks before we get out of here? Next week, obviously, we'll also get into some quarterbacks, some remaining combine discussion. But before we sign off today, any final thoughts? Maybe Kenny Pickett or to be me, there's not a lot of quarterbacks that stood out a ton to me today personally. But I don't know if anyone stood out to you. Yeah,
I mean, you talk Kenny Pickett ran a 4.67. I've often compared him to Derek Carr. Derek Carr ran a 4.69 at the combine. He checked in at 6'2 and 3/8, 214 pounds. Obviously has the bigger hand, but Kenny checks in at 6'3, 217. Obviously a little bit shorter hands, but very comparable as far as vertical jump if you're into those type of measurables and intangibles and things like that. But ultimately, I mean, I think when you watch them play on the field, it's very comparable. So other than that, I mean, Kenny Pickett, I'm curious to see how he throws. I'm really curious. Does Malik throw here? I think he's going to. We didn't see him run or anything like that, but quarterbacks, it's going to be a never ending topic of the draft. It's going to be a never ending debate. So we'll see how it shakes out for some of these guys, but props to Thornton on the 4.21, the fastest 40 that we've seen. But man, Chris Olave 4.26. Christian Watson.
Did you see that kid's face on Chris Olave's 40?
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's a great reaction. That's a great reaction.
That's awesome. But no, appreciate all the love from everybody. It's been a very active chat. I wish we could keep going, but we got to set these air raid guys up. And thanks, Ron, and thanks, Rich, for always steering the show. It was a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, great. I mean, awesome time. Great job from everybody. Round of applause all around. Again, cheers to my homie who's getting married. Little bachelor party action. That's why we have this drinking the bourbon out of this mug tonight. It was Willet bourbon, by the way. So that's what I had in the mug this evening. So join in.
Vodka
We're going to continue to do this. What'd you have tonight?
Vodka soda in a solo cup, like a classy gentleman.
I love it in the solo cup. But yeah, continue to, hang out with us. We're going to do this show every Thursday night leading up to the NFL draft. We're going to keep talking about, again, next week, probably, the rest of our combine reactions, get more, on the quarterbacks and the other position groups, offensive line, all that great stuff. And continue to, go through. We'll probably do a mock draft live. We might grab a guest and we'll kind of rotate through some picks in the future. So definitely jump in, continue to hang out with us as we go up to the NFL draft. But as always, for Russell Brown, again, at Russ, NFLDraft.com. He does awesome stuff. Follow him on Twitter. He does little snippets of players throughout the day. It's good stuff to interact with. And for myself, at Burner Sports, we appreciate everybody. And we are out. NFL Draft Weekly, Cover 1.